Hi everyone. I did want to make a couple videos today. I just didn't have enough time, but I do want to speak a little more about the issue of President Bush. The other topic I wanted to cover, I'll probably have to leave for tomorrow. Just been very busy. It is a very busy week. It's kind of a busy month, at least the first half of the month, as those of you that might be working are preparing to go on vacation. So a lot of people are trying to fit in a lot of work related things. So in the meantime, we are going to have basically a national holiday. I don't remember what day of the week it is. It might be either tomorrow or Thursday, but it's, I guess, not a national holiday, but basically you're going to see no mail delivered and stuff like that. So all this is because of President Bush. And I am not going to be one of those people who dances on his grave. I know people, for example, Sticks, Axe, and Hammer hates the Bushes to such an extent that he's basically celebrating their deaths. Okay, fine. If he wants to do that, go ahead. I don't think I'm going to celebrate Bush's death, but my problem with everybody who's basically praising him is that they're saying that this was like a very nice guy. He had a real grace and just a more dignified demeanor, and there was talk about how him and the Secret Service people that protected him would go on cookie runs in the middle of the night and whatever and eat milk and cookies. Look, I in fact I actually spoke to somebody, and I was just mentioning this interview to somebody on the phone. I spoke to one of his Secret Service bodyguards basically one time on Bold Like a Leopard. Gary Byrne, very nice person. I was very honored that he'd give me the time, even though I'm not a national publication. I'm just a YouTube guy. He said, "Yeah, but, George H.W. Bush was a very nice guy, great person to work for. Just also, I've like a lot of people say, had a great relationship with his wife Barbara. I understand people who knew him, really loved him. Good for them. The real question, in my opinion, is what is the country left with now that he died as now that he's dead, now that he passed away, and obviously he's not going to be doing anything anymore. So I'll say it this way: I was driving today, and sometimes when I drive, I listen to this show, the Prager show, when I'm driving to lunch or something. And the Prager show, Dennis Prager is a guy I would say is a very, just standard template conservative. And there's many areas where I think he's very moralistic, very cookie cutter in his conservative views. But at least sometimes he stands his ground and doesn't get looped in with everybody else. And what he said about George H.W. Bush was that yes, he might have been a great person, and obviously he was from the greatest generation, which was that's the name given to the generation that served in World War II. Fought against Japan and Germany and Italy. But the reality is that he was a very naive person with respect to the Democrats. Okay, there was the issue where he was basically forced to go back on his campaign promise not to raise taxes because the Democrats convinced him, well, if you do raise taxes, we will decrease spending. And of course, he did raise taxes, and they did not decrease spending. But that I think is, Prager made the point because that's what's important to him. And then later in the day, I heard another commentator, Larry Elder, when I was on my way back home from work, say that, well, he may have been a very nice person and may have publicly talked about how private charity does the work of the government. So why do we need welfare and a lot of these entitlements? But in the end, Bush signed the Americans with Disabilities Act, which did create a lot of liabilities for businesses and in the end didn't really help the disabled. I think that was a fair point too. What I think is is breathtaking, though. Breathtaking. I really am surprised at this. Is that nobody on the side of whether it's conservatism, whether it's the far left, whether it's just plain old liberals, nobody wants to criticize President Bush's 1989 decision to invade Panama, and take it over in order to basically dispose of the dictator of Panama who was dealing drugs. Look, we have a lot of countries around the world, where the leadership is involved in some very shady shit. And what he did in the course of that invasion was basically say that the United States is basically the policeman of the world. That is what he's saying. I wouldn't say it was the first time it happened, and it sure as hell wasn't the last time. And I think what he was basically saying was, even for as inane of a decision as that was, just because Manuel Noriega was dealing drugs, that the United States would invade one of our neighboring countries in Central America. Yes, Panama is a few, there's a few countries between us and Panama. But I would say that it's very shocking that he's not remembered for that. So I like to, with all due respect to all the people who are, family members of his, worked for him, knew him, go ahead. You can appreciate his life. I think that he is not criticized enough for the things that he did to get America basically hated by the rest of the world. And on the domestic front, what is George Bush really remembered for? I mean, what did he was in Congress for a few years. By the way, he was not a supporter of the civil rights agenda of the early 60s, if you're one of the people who finds that to be important. Now, he did say that the laws that would have been enacted by that legislation would have been, violating a lot of the local authority of some of these states or whatever. I'm just saying that people who put such a huge stock on politicians' support for civil rights and minorities and whatever, well, in the early 60s, George Bush, from what I read, was not exactly a fan of the civil rights movement and its its actions in the state of Texas, where he'd moved by then. So the other thing is that people dwell on this whole thing about how nice he was and how dignified and everything. I'll tell you something. I think when you go to work, yeah, you should definitely be nice to the people you work with. But when you're somebody who you lead a country, when you also maybe even lead a business, sometimes being nice isn't really what is a measure of success. Sometimes what's really a measure of success is making the right decision and having the courage to do things that in many ways might not be understood to be the nice thing to do at the time, but with the long view, you do the right thing because you believe it's the right thing, not because people are going to say it was the nice thing to do. And that's not the way that George Bush behaved when he was president. He was pretty much an establishment figure, didn't really like to shake anything up. I think that's one of the reasons that the conservative movement ended up rejecting his legacy in the end. There was a Pat Buchanan challenge of his day where Buchanan started to talk about the economic nationalism and even cultural nationalism of the time. Some people say racial nationalism. I'm not precisely sure what happened. If any of you are Pat Buchanan fans, feel free to put in the comments what your thoughts are on that. I don't think it's really examined enough, so I'm not going to pass judgment on either Buchanan or his opponents. So again, people want to make this all about being nice. George Bush was very nice. That's why he's an example. And yet they don't take his example, and they don't live by his example, if it's even true. And this is an excellent exhibit of what I'm talking about here.
So America will spend this week saying goodbye to our 41st president, George HW Bush, who passed away at 94 this weekend, and the tributes have been pouring in from family and former presidents. And, you know, and looking at him as president compared to, you know,
It's a different time. Man.
you know, it suddenly puts everybody in a different perspective.
Yeah.
You know, and it reminds us in a weird kind of way, sorry, I still got the call, how you can still not agree with somebody, but be respectful of somebody.
So people at the time when Bush was president, they did consider him a racist. So they're lying. People did consider President Bush a racist. Not just because of the whole, what was the guy's name? I keep thinking his name is Leroy Horton, but I don't think that's his name. Willie Horton, yeah, Leroy Horton. I don't remember who that is. I'm thinking of Leroy Jordan of the Dallas Cowboys. So Willie Horton, the whole ad in I believe it was 1988. That is why they call Bush typically racist. But they were also calling him racist, if I'm not mistaken, due to what was happening during the Rodney King riots and the number of other issues that were happening at the time. So no, people, when President Bush was president, they did call him a racist, okay? Rightly or wrongly, they did call him a racist. I personally don't really care, and I probably wouldn't have voted for Bush anyway. I think that these people are being disingenuous. They're pretending that they would have, by the way, most of them in this clip were active in public life during that time, except maybe Sonny Hostin and Meghan McCain. So what the hell are they talking about? I don't believe any of them supported President Bush in 1992, and I don't believe any of them objected to all the people calling them racist at the time.
And that's the thing I think I dug the most is him rolling with Bill Clinton, you know.
He seems to be
taking care of
coming
business.
from a loving, kind place also, the man. That's what I am gleaning from what they're talking about.
So they like him because President Bush was enough of a softie that he accepted Bill Clinton, even though the reality is that Bill Clinton was a very corrupt president. So why is it that why is it that George HW Bush himself would have no problem, interacting with Bill Clinton? Well, yeah, maybe it was because Bush was a nice person, but maybe it's because he was a nice person and also corrupt, which he was. So, you can be a nice person, but you can also do things wrong. You can invade Panama for shits and giggles. There's a lot of bad things you can do and still claim to be a nice person, whatever the hell that means.
That he was loving.
He was also known for his humility as president, and he talked about it a lot, that he was there to serve the people. He's a combat veteran. He's actually our last combat veteran to ever serve. He lied about his age to join the military, the Navy, after Pearl Harbor. An incredible life of service to our country. He was a two-term congressman, ambassador to the UN, chairman of the RNC, United States envoy, director of the CIA, and 8 years as vice president, and then obviously became president himself. But his love story with Barbara Bush, more than anything, is what touched me. They did interviews up until just, I think, 2 years ago with Jenna, where they're crying about their love for one another, and he died 8 months after her, and I just think...
So this is why The View is a useless talk show in order to actually address anything that's important to the public. Everybody, okay, maybe not everybody, but the majority of people who rise to the pinnacle of power have a wife, have kids, probably even have pets. I remember President Clinton had his pet cat Socks. For some reason, everybody knew that he had a pet cat named Socks, which, good for the cat. Does it matter in the big picture? No. Does it matter that Bush's marriage was good? No. Apparently, and this is from a couple sources, he also cheated on Barbara Bush, which I also don't care about. I think when you're at the pinnacle of power, these people who cheat on their wives, I think that there's much worse things that they end up doing than that. So, yeah, these people don't know what the hell is the most important. I mean, think about the priorities here. We're talking about his wife passed away several months ago. Now he's dead. How about we just address all of the problems that he left for the country instead of just going and lauding every single mundane thing that he did like anybody else.
It's a really beautiful example of a life of service and a great love.
That's why this weekend, so true. I felt like it was more of a celebration than anything else. It was a celebration of life, as you said, Megan, of marriage, of a life of service. They were married 73 years. And Jenna, his granddaughter, interviewed him recently on the Today Show. And he said when he dies, the first person he wants to see would be Barbara if she goes first, then his mother, and then his 3-year-old daughter, who you remember passed away of leukemia. What I love most about him is that he was a family man, and he always put his family first. So you said he was the first envoy of China to China, and actually my family lived in the same home 35 years later that he lived in, and they still talk about him there today as being humble, as being funny. He was funny, and he was just.
Okay, so to clarify what's going on here, The View has two quote-unquote conservatives on the panel. So you saw Meghan McCain, who's obviously the daughter of John McCain. And then there's Abby Huntsman, who is the daughter of U.S. Ambassador John Huntsman, who was basically was the ambassador to China under Obama. But he was a Republican. So all I'm saying is this, okay? The View is having two women who are daughters of prominent establishment Republican politicians comment on the death of an establishment Republican politician. So you could say that we're hearing just what's being approved from the people above. They're not going to say anything overly controversial about President Bush, but watch what happens when somebody does.
He was real. And I loved his relationship with the press, because we talk about that a lot on this show. And they were tough on him. It's not like they were easy on George H.W. Bush.
The press is tough on every president. That's part of their job. They're supposed to be.
He had such a respect for what they did.
Yes.
And the role that they played. So I think there's so much to learn from his life. And I hope that the next generation, they may not know him the way that we do, the way we remember him, but I hope they learn from him.
I want to say one thing about him that was not picked up really, because as a candidate, he said,
here we go.
Those who think we're powerless to do anything about the greenhouse effect are forgetting about the White House effect. And then he signed into law the Clean Air Act Amendment of 1990, one of the most sweeping environmental statutes ever. This president that we have now is trying to unravel everything that he did and Obama did. And if I ever become a one-issue voter, it will be about pollution and the greenhouse effect.
So this is all huffing and useless air. The point is she wants to vote for the Democrats, and everybody knows that she wants to vote for the Democrats. Who cares? There's nothing that's going to sway Joy Behar to vote for anybody besides the Democrats. And if climate change was such a priority for her, then she probably would have voted green, which we know she didn't. Because the Democrats, if you are all into this climate change bullshit, which is what it is, you would probably be voting green, because the Democrats basically, they talk a big game and then they do nothing.
And Can we focus on the president, please? I don't want to talk about Trump. We're in the moment we're honoring a great president who's passed.
Please. I want to talk about
we're honoring, but I'm not interested in your one issue.
I don't care what you're interested in. I'm talking.
Well, I don't care what you're interested in
We'll
either.
be right back.
Okay.
Yeah, and apparently, from what I saw, when they went off camera, Joy Behar called her a bitch. Called Meghan McCain a bitch, and they are bitches, all of them, all the people that were. I mean, Abby Huntsman, I guess I don't really know much about her, but yeah, these are people. They want to talk about how nice President Bush was because they have this inflated notion of how nice they are, but they're just on TV to present this veneer of niceness. In reality, they support any of these presidents that are just greedy, corrupt. They invade countries that we don't necessarily have any business invading. It's not like those countries pose a threat to us. Panama didn't present a threat to us under President Bush. Okay, so that's my point, that we don't need to just pretend that President Bush, because he was a nice guy, that it excuses all of the crap that he got us into. So I'm going to close here by saying all these nice guy Republicans who we're going to oppose Donald Trump because we're the real good people or whatever. You know, they call themselves Republicans or never Trump Republicans or whatever. These are the people who have made the Republican Party a failure, because honestly, Donald Trump, I think, is I think he's far from perfect. I think there's issues that I would have with him, but I think that he is trying to change the country. These people are not trying to change the country. They're trying to use the country in order to enrich themselves and to accomplish their own personal goals. Okay, which I think Donald Trump is a vast improvement on them. So they have a huge setback now because the Weekly Standard, a so-called conservative newspaper or magazine that was founded by Bill Kristol, I think 25 years ago, they're going belly up, and it's over for them. I think we should celebrate this, because the reality is that they try to play nice. They try to play, we're the legitimate conservatives. We're the quote-unquote principled conservatives. You're not principled. It is a personal difference that you guys have with Donald Trump. Just admit it. In terms of ideas, you don't really have any new ideas. And nobody's going to help you just because you pretend that you're nicer than the people that you hate. That's about it. Please like the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to my other channel, Razor Ray Live Wounds. I am going back to live streams, at least enabled live streams, in 2 days. So we'll see what happens to the other channel. Please subscribe to me on BitChute, Chef Leopard, on Gab, at Starscream85, Minds.com, at Chef Leopard. And also, please find me on the Patreon, which is in the link below. I'll talk to you guys later. Have a great night and enjoy your Wednesday.